Morning. I'd like to introduce the guy that's going to introduce me.
Okay, welcome everyone to the special presentation we have today. We are very delighted to have with us a legend.
Ah,
Okay, someone that we are in the presence of greatness here. So I'm not going to take
I'll give you the money after, okay?
no, to just to hit the highlights on this guy's resume would take probably another half hour. I'm not going to do that. So without any further ado, let me introduce Mr. Liam ONeill. Yep,
Thanks.
welcome. Oh, and he said when I asked him how we wanted to be introduced, he goes, "Just tell him to sit down and listen." So here we go.
Yeah. Actually, this is how I spell my name, and I say ships a lot of cattle. One of the biggest bull shippers in the country. Ha ha ha. Yeah. Okay, I have been known to tell the odd joke and stuff like that. And it's mainly just to keep you guys awake, you know. And it's very nice to be here. I was here 3 years ago. Yeah. And we had a lot of fun. We were down at the Irish Fest at the time. Got to hang out in the green room with bands with names like Socks in the Frying Pan. No, not kidding. That's what they were called. Socks in the Frying Pan. I just make sure the lid is working. Oh, we're cutting in and out for some reason. That's all right. Half what I say is rubbish anyway, so as long as the right half comes out when the mic's on, you're laughing. Now, I started off turning in 1968, so I'm 49 years. What date is today? What? Tomorrow is my 39th anniversary as a turner. 14th of May 1968. So, whew, made it this far. You know the story about the optimist who jumped off the building? Yeah, you heard it right. Okay, I won't tell the rest of it. Yeah. Yeah, well, people looking out windows all the way down the building, and it was like 60 stories. And every time he passed a story, he'd say, "So far, so good." You all heard it before. This, you didn't? Okay. Right. I started in 1968, and from the very beginning, I was a jobbing wood turner. In other words, we did it for a living. And at the time, you could still get an apprenticeship here and there, and I was very fortunate. Now, I got the job as a wood turner as a job. I didn't never, till the day I walked into my job as a wood turner, I had never seen a wood turning lathe. Never. I might have seen pictures of one, but I didn't recognize what it was. You know what I mean? I genuinely never saw a wood turner's lathe. I did not want to be a wood turner. I just knew I was getting a job and being taken off the street because I'd been feeding cattle. Anyway, I was genuinely feeding cattle, working for a farmer, mucky, dirty job, and I was hoping to get something better. And when this opportunity came along, guy starting a woodwork business looking for a slightly older apprentice. And I went and I applied and got the job. Walked in the first morning, there was a guy, and he had a block of wood on, and he was making a lamp. And that was the first time I ever saw wood turning, ever. And here was the guy making the lamp, and he's going, and there's the lamp shaping under my eyes. Oops. Yeah, I'm like this. And I said, never want to do anything else ever again. And I didn't, well, on part-time. Now, we initially would have made all our bowls from huge planks of West African hardwood imported directly from Lagos, Nigeria. And it would have come in up to 14 inches by 6 inches thick. And these planks, they were out of a wood called Afzelia, which you can, if you Google it, AFZELIA, you can actually buy Afzelia burl for turning from some of the wood people in this country. But we bought these planks. They were you won't believe this, but I actually ended up in Galway, friends with the daughter of one of the people that used to ship out this stuff from Lagos. She was a Nigerian woman, moved to Galway. And she said, oh yeah, that was my dad, you know. And she said they used to go in the jungle and they'd haul down trees that were 10 feet diameter and 100 feet high. And they'd plank them up in Lagos and ship them off. And we'd get them. By the time we got them, they were dry. And so we would take our planks, cut them into squares, take them to the bandsaw, and then turn bowls. We would cut the requisite. I'm getting in and out here. Anyway, I'll just keep talking. So we would just make the bowls directly out of hard, dry wood. And that used to be fun. But I didn't know any better because I'd never done any wood turning before. So what did I know? And the other thing is, we would turn the back of the bowl, the outside of the bowl, we would polish it, finish it completely, and the inside is still solid, remember? Then we would turn it around, and guess what we used as a chuck? A 3-jaw engineer's chuck. So you know your 3 points of contact, and these things are 14 inches by 6 inches deep, and no high-speed steel those days. This sounds like one of my barefoot going to school in the snow stories, you know. But it was no high-speed steel. That wasn't until later. It was being invented at the time because there was a man called Peter Child in Great Britain who came out with the very first, what he called a super flute, and it was half-inch. It was 5/8 shank, a half-inch, just like this, and that was the first one. And but before that, for a couple of years, 4 or 5 years before that, we turned with the old tool steel. And when you sharpened it, we used grey carborundum stones because we didn't, that's what we had. So we sharpened it on that, and you always had to have a slipstone. Always, because the grey carborundum doesn't produce a very good edge, so you get this little furry edge. So you're you know, carborundum. But anyway, we managed, and then eventually, after 4 or 5 years, I got a job with another turner, and he was completely different because in Ireland, traditionally, going back thousands of years, the turners would go to the woods, and this is a little bit interesting. So, well, it's interesting just to show you that if you have a log standing in the woods, the tree growing in the woods, and you get your axe, and you chop, 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 like that. Okay, see where this is going? So you chop out that. So you end up with these, you take a bit off the top. And then you split it all the way down. And then cut it off at the bottom, and you end something that looks like this. And each one of those, they're conjoined like that. So each one of those, they then take an adze, and they would chop out a section of the middle here of each one. Take the corners off with the axe. And that was 3 rough, now this is not the right dimensions, you know, but it's just for show. They would then take these, and they might be a lot longer than this, there might be 5 or 6 conjoined roughouts. They would take them home, stick them up in their whatever rough barn or whatever they had, and they would dry them. And then they would part them off, and each one is put on a lathe, a pole lathe, you know the one? You always knew pole lathe turners, you know, child would be going along with his daddy and he'd say, ah, look daddy, there's a pole lathe turner. How would he know? One leg was twice as big as the other. Anyway, they would turn these, and that's how it was done traditionally. And they keep finding these conjoined rough out blanks in peat bogs, buried near where the guy was harvesting them. So when this wood turner I went to work for, he would buy the blocks from the local sawmill, and he used native wood, and he would rough out his blanks just like we do today. Rough out the blanks, leave them to dry, part turn them, etc. Like there's a roughed out wide rim bowl with undercut, you know, the one I'll be turning later. And so this is about nearly an inch thick, and part turned. You can see it's fairly rough. So all bowls were done like that, and that's how we started off. So what I'm going to do today for my first project, I'm just going to do a regular bowl. And I think that if you can turn an ordinary salad bowl and do it well, you can turn anything. That's what I figure. I think it's the basis of most wood turning today. Like even people like David Ellsworth, if you talk to David Ellsworth, he'll show you images from when he started out as a wood turner, and he was making salad bowls, bread boards, salt shakers, sugar shakers, all kinds of stuff. Now, traditionally, gouges were ground like this. So it's straight across. See that? What they call, I suppose, fingernail grind. Anyway, a good few years ago, due to a long process of experimentation, I started developing something which now is called the Irish grind, and it's where it's ground way back at the sides. And I was doing that back in the early 80s, and in 1985 David Ellsworth came over as a demonstrator to Ireland, and while he was there he fell in love with the idea of the Irish grind. So the rest is history. You know, he sells it, a signature tool and all, but and he does a good job of with it. And actually I noticed that Ellsworth, when he got my Irish grind in his hands, he started to do things with it that I hadn't thought of. You know what I mean? And then Del Stubbs came along, another great turner, and he started doing things with it that I'd never thought of. So even though I'd come up with the concept, I really didn't know how good it was until I saw these other guys. Oh yeah, you could do this, and oh yeah, you could do that, you know. So that was fun. Now, one of the benefits of the Irish grind, it's ground way back at the two sides, like that. Most people... Sorry, Jack. Nowadays, most people have these rather than the straight grind, which is peculiar. Now, this is going to drive me. Oh, it's a battery. Okay, hopefully we won't have any interruption in transmission. When I started coming over here, you couldn't get anything like an Irish grind. It was all the straight grind, and I used to bring them over with me all ground up, and I used to sell them and make a fortune from selling them. So it was good. You can't do that anymore because everybody's worked out that if you take an ordinary grind and go to your grinder, you can make an Irish grind. Just like I did. Now, one of the benefits of the Irish grind is because it's got the long side wing and it's got a fairly short angle on the tip. You can stand well back like this. Now your thumb, that's a guard. It kind of keeps the shavings from hitting you in the face. So you pull it sideways like that. And it takes quite a bit of meat off the wood. Much more. It takes it off a lot quicker than the old traditional gouge. The guy who trained me as a turner, I lost contact with him for about 15 years, and then we founded the Irish Woodturners Guild, and after a few years he kind of came back into the wood turning scene, and he was visiting me in my shop, and we were doing a workshop for a bunch of people, and he stood up and he said, you know, when I was training him, the only safety gear we had was your thumb stuck up in the air to stop the shavings hitting you in the pus. The only disadvantage is it makes a terrible mess. So you get all the waste off, and then the next thing I'll do is get the rest parallel to the ways. Not parallel, you idiot. Right angles. That's called spot the mistake. Now, to straighten the bottom, because this is at right angles, if you get your hand sliding in here, so you get this, get a good grip on the gouge, get it digging into the nose like that. That one isn't working, Jack, is it? Is that camera? Oh, good, good, good. Can you zoom that in there? That's good. You can probably just leave it at that. So you just push it in, get a dimple made like that, and then pull sideways like that. See? And you end up with a flat surface. And if you want to trim it a little bit, you use the bottom side ground as a scraper. The darn wire is catching in my... Oh, wow. For Pete's sake. It's a good thing that I'm not alone in my shop, or it wouldn't be Pete I'd be mentioning. Okay, I think we have it now. But you can just use that as a scraper, so make sure you turn it well over on its side so that the wood is coming down at a trailing angle. And if you want to know what happens if you leave it up like that, just do it once. Now, we'll make a little mark here like that, and that's just so that when I change the faceplate around, I have something to look through the center of the faceplate. Now, at home, I do hundreds and hundreds of bowls at a time, so I would do batches, you know. I would do all the backs, then all the fronts, and etc. Everything is done in batch production. You can hear me blowing in this. There was a guy walked into a bar in Ireland. He ran up to the counter and he said, "Barman," he said, "I want you to put 12 whiskies in a row on the counter, please, quick." So the barman did. He put 12 whiskies in a row on the counter. Some of you will have heard this before because I told it when I was here before. Anyway, the guy starts one end. All 12. All down. Job done. Barman looks at him and he says, "You're some man to drink whiskey." And the guy says, "You'd do it too," he said, "if you had what I have." And the barman said, "Why? What have you?" $1.50. That's just to relieve the boredom while I'm screwing screws here. And we don't quite need 8 screws, we'll go back down to 6. because I see I bought about 600 face plates before they invented chucks, and I'm damned if I'm going to stop using them. No, there is a more prosaic reason. When you put a tenon on for a chuck, you still have to reverse chuck it and take it off and change the bottom shape afterwards. Well, why not put if you put a faceplate on with the screws, you put it on, and then every stage of the bowl, now, you know, I'm talking about when the bowl is dry. You put on the faceplate, and then you leave it on till the bowl is completely finished. So you're on, yeah. But that's me. I have.
How long does it take the bowl to dry?
No, I don't leave it on while it's drying.
Okay.
No, but when it's dry, like this one, I put the faceplate on and I leave it on till the bowl is completely finished. Do you understand me? Okay.
Well, I guess I don't understand you because when you take that green bowl off of there and let it dry, those holes aren't filling up.
No, correct. I'll come to that. That's a wise observation. But hey. Now, another benefit of the Irish grind is with your fairly short angle on the tip is that you can go around the back of the bowl and you can come like this. And your bevel is still riding rather. So look out for any knots or odd things like that. Now we're going to lose ½ inch off the height of the bowl, so so the bottom of the bowl is going to be roughly there. Doesn't show up very well, but anyway.
What kind of wood are you using?
I haven't got the foggiest. Somebody handed me a block, and there's been a debate about whether it's elm or hickory. Oh, it's hackberry. Oh, that's good, because that's much nicer than hickory. Oh, thanks. Now, by the way, at some point, I hate to bring this up, but I'm going to need some kind of a light for looking inside stuff. Sean, do we have a? Okay. We're all right just for now, but we will need it very soon. Now the next thing I do is I straighten off the front. You can do it the other way as well if you like. Just pull like that. Now I'm just going to do this as if it was a rough out. We will finish it to shape, but I treat it as a rough out just for the moment. Now, I like to do this. I just decide what width I'm going to leave my wall while it's drying, and either use a parting tool or this little guy. This is a handy little tool which it's just ground to a point, and then a little flat. The nose is square. There's actually a little square on the nose. I see now. Can I get that? Can you see that? Yeah, it's a handy little guy for doing all kinds of jobs, as will become apparent during the day. One of them. Well, you can, for this job, it would be fine leaving it pointed, but I do other things with it which require it to be flat. So as we go through the day, this is a multi-purpose tool. So we will show you all the purposes. Now, for taking out the inside, again, you're going to use the long side ground to take a big chunk and crank up the speed just for fun. Now most of you have seen this 1,000 times. It's just another thing, I like to have a good long handle so you can go nice and deep into the bowl before you have to change the rest. Now 45 and 45, this is approximately 45 to the ways, and it's over at 45-degree angle. Do you know what I mean? If you laid a straight edge across the two flats here, it would be approximately 45. One of the reasons I put this little wall here is that when you start in here, you know, you don't get this fly back. Everybody nods. There are some things which are common to all wood turners, and one of them is kickback. Now this is patented, so you can't copy it, right? It's an ordinary piece of wood and an ordinary dowel, and it's a good way of making a so you can do it without stopping the machine, see? Tell how much too far you've gone. We're nearly there. Now the beauty of the shape of this is you can start cutting up here like that. Keep the nose bevel riding, and then as you go down around, because it's got a fairly square nose, you keep a bevel riding all the way to center. See? I don't always do that, I just go but it's handy. Gives you a nice cut. See, that's good. I like this hackberry. Thanks a million. Where? Oh yeah. Yes! Thank you. That's good. Oh. Now, I'm just going to take some finish cuts. Now, normally what you would do is if you're making a salad bowl or a functional bowl, you would take the wood and you would dry it. Now, I'm always asked about ways you can dry wood, and what I have at home is I have a room which is about 8 feet by 6 feet by 6 feet, and it's got a couple of doors on the front, and you can buy a machine from the wood, different types of wood dryers. This eBac makes one, and it goes inside your box and it sucks the air from the room, from the chamber, into the machine, and it's got refrigerated coils which condense the moisture out of the air as it passes over. and then it flows out through a tube outside. Or what I do is I just have a bucket inside the room, and it just collects in the bucket, and I keep it emptied, and that way I know what's happening. I know how much moisture is coming out and everything. Now there's another way. I showed this here the last time I was here. It's a nifty little thing you can do. If you make a box like that, a little bit, there we go. This is a box, plywood, 1/2-inch plywood will do, and if you want, you can put a little hinge door on it, hinges, clasp, and you drill some holes in the top, 2-inch holes, maybe 5 of them, and then inside you put, you know, your ordinary little household dehumidifier that you put in a room after you've painted it or plastered it or something. You put one of those inside, and so the cable is coming out here, the machine is inside. Okay, now the dehumidifier is inside the box, and you put your bowls on the top of the outside of the box, stack them on the top. Okay, now at this stage there are people in the audience who are saying to themselves, has ONeill lost his marbles? Because the drying unit is inside the box and the bowls are outside on top of the box. Well, actually, here's what you do. You go to your local skip or your dumpster, and you find where somebody has thrown out a great big plastic bag. You know, the big clear plastic bags that they put on, say you buy packing material or you buy wall insulation. They come with these enormous big plastic, you know the things? Right, you get one of those and you literally just put it on the box and tape it all around. Now the plastic, the bowls are up like this, stacked on top, upside down, so that the air can get inside them. And when you turn on the machine, it sucks all the air out of here, and you got a dryer. Okay, I've exaggerated that. That plastic shouldn't be that big. But I've tried this. Now, the interesting thing about it is it'll work great for about 2 weeks, and it'll take it down to about 20%. And then it stops. For some reason I can't figure out. Well, if you've got a very air-conditioned shop, just take the bowls out and leave them on the side, and they'll dry anyway. But if most damage takes place when you're drying a bowl at the very early stages, you know, when there's a lot of moisture and it comes out too quickly, that's when you do damage. That's when you get the cracks. So by using the machine, it takes it out at a very slow, steady rate, and over a couple of weeks, and you don't crack your bowls as much. You might crack an odd one, but far less than if you just left them out. And of course you can experiment with coating the bowls with, and you can have all these conversations among yourselves about drying them inside shavings and in brown paper bags, and that's okay. That's another day's discussion.
So you're not putting any anchor seal on, they're just raw?
I get away with doing that. You might try it with raw ones, try it with anchor seal, you know, experiment. Now, let's say that this is dry, which of course it's not, but just to show you how I take some of the finer cuts, I'm not going to finish this bowl. I will finish this one because I brought that with me from Ireland, and it's dry, slightly spalted beech. So to get a fine cut, you're going to need a downward angle here. There we go. There's a number of ways you can do it, but if you get your gouge laying on its side like that, pointing almost straight at the... There we go. I'm doing this very slow, so that I'll put it on again, but just to show you that you can get a really good cut on end grain. Like the guy writing home to his mother, he said, I'm writing this letter slowly because I know you can't read very fast. Now because this is wet, it's pulling out, the grain is pulling out, but that's the way you would position the tool for a fine cut. See on the end grain there, it's nice and clean, there's no tears. There are some tears there, but that's from the old roughing out. Now you can also put it at an angle. There we go. Put it at an angle like that, and you're using the bottom side wing as a shear scraper, and you can just gently kiss the wood and just pull it along like that. It's good for furry grain like that. This is just showing you what's possible. I'll pass this around when I'm finished. Now I didn't bother doing the whole side, I just did a little bit in the middle, so you can see how clean it is. We have for doing the inside, when I'm taking a fine cut, I'm just going to show you here on the rim. Can you zone in on the rim here? Zoom in on the rim. See, the tool is turned up on its side, exaggerated over on its side, so that it's overhung, like me on a Monday morning. No, it's overhung. See that? And you get a really nice clean cut. See, if you put a straight edge across the two edges, it would actually be at 45 degrees under. Do you follow me? So by bringing the wood down on it like that, you get the most beautiful shear cut. See that? So we'll take another cut just to... don't do that. I may take another cut because I damaged the edge there. Now, to avoid doing that, you know, that snap back, if you rub the bevel on the wood gently and back out and then go in cutting, generally takes care of that. And I always touch that little corner gently with something like the scrape. Just use it like a scraper just to clean that off, because if you leave that sharp it would cut you to the bone. But you can touch it now, you know. Now for doing the inside, with this size of a bowl I generally find I just need to position the rest once. Now I like to start the cut down the side again, just like I did on the rim. I turn the gouge well over on its side like that. I get the bevel riding and I back out and then I go in cutting. And try not to rub the bevel too hard. In fact, I think the terminology for describing how a bevel is in contact with the wood, a lot of people say keep your bevel rubbing, okay? And I actually think that's a little bit wrong. I think it's better to say riding, and I'll tell you why. I like to think of the bevel as gently, not much friction, riding along behind the cut. Whereas if you rub too hard, it bruises it, yeah. But as well as that, if you come across any little bit of where there's softer and harder grain, it'll go imperceptibly into the grain, and you'll end up with ribbing, like swirls. And it's quite common. And what often happens with people is somebody will have told them, or they'll have read in a book about riding the bevel. So they'll take their cut and they'll end up with ribbing from rubbing too hard, and they'll say, oh, I'm getting ribbing, I mustn't be rubbing the bevel hard enough, right? And they'll rub it even harder, and then guess what? The ribbing gets worse. So yes, exactly. So very gentle. And again, it's way over on its side, so that the wood is coming down at a very, very shearing angle. Now, I've gone down about halfway with the ordinary fingernail or regular ground or whatever you want to call it. Then I get my Irish grind with the nose bevel fairly short, and you see that'll rub all the way to center with the bevel rubbing. See that? So you come back, rub the bevel in the cut that you've already made, and then kind of continue on down. Do it a couple of times if you have to. You can go all the way to center with the bevel riding. Now, what you will find is that it's not always easy to go to center with the bevel riding and to get a perfect meeting. You know, you'll end up with oh, here we might as well use this up to the last. When you come down the bowl like that, you'll end up with either a bump like that or a slight dimple like that. So even though you've got your bevel riding, it's just a bit difficult. It's just that tiny bit of extra effort. So my answer to that is the scraper. And I'll show you the type of scraper I have. So just take one more. Now the scraper I use is, it started off as a square end scraper, and it's 1.5 inches by I think it's 3/8 thick. It's a heavy duty scraper, and so I grind a slight dome in the top here, and then I round one side over just a little bit. It's only a radius of about 3/8, or no more than that, about 3/4 of an inch of a radius, and that radius is not important. The important thing is that you have a round corner here, and the reason is that, I don't know, can you see that very well, but you just go sideways like that, and because you've got one round corner, you're not going to have a sharp corner here. How many times have you used a scraper in the bottom of a bowl and the sharp corner makes a mark? Well, that's why I round that corner. Just like that, and it's only a gentle touch. Now, if I was in a production situation, I would have, you know, done it ages ago. It's just that for the sake of the demo, I like to do it slowly. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pass this around so you can see the various cuts. If somebody wants to finish this another time, Sean, yeah, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll put a dovetail on the bottom, and then it can be caught in a Sean, I think he's putting it up to you. Yeah. I know. Now you see that can be chucked up. Now you can pass it around. And this was only done, I've deliberately left the wall thick so somebody can finish the bowl. And it's just to show you the cuts. The real work is going to be doing this one. Now, if you look at this, it's got nearly 2 inches of a rim. And see the way it's undercut. And the idea, and there's always an idea behind a design. The idea behind this particular bowl is that you do a wide rim like that, comes down like that, and then it goes undercut like that. Now, you put their trail mix or your nuts or whatever in here, and when you pull them back up under the rim, they fall back into your fingers, you know, and you pass it around from person to person. It's great fun. You can share the germs, you know. Actually, we used to make salad bowls for chefs, and they were 14 inches by 6 inches, and the chef would use their fingers to toss the salad, and the wide rim kept it from falling out, you know. So it's an interesting little design, and it's tricky because how do you get this nice and smooth? How do you cut down along here with the gouge? You know, so we'll be talking about all those issues as we go along. Now, my friend over here who asks the most intelligent questions, and I mean it, he said, when you put your rough bowl on the faceplate, the screw holes don't match anymore. That is absolutely right. And that was an astute observation. Now, somewhere here, I had a tri-square, and it's just gone walkabout, which is highly embarrassing in the middle of a demo. Okay, talk among yourselves for a second. Let's see if I can find it. Now, by the way, did you notice the restraint that time? Anyone notice the huge restraint? When I was in there by myself, I never said any cuss words. I found it. Now, what I do is I get a carpenter square. It has a longer wooden handle on it here and a longer blade here, and I put a bit of white tape on it and I put various marks. But what you do is you pick a number, say in this case 6, and you mark it there. Now this is oval, this is narrow, this is wide, so you move it and you mark 4 times at the same number, 6 inches in this case. Now if you're doing a lot of bowls, this happens a lot faster and it's much different. Now you see that that's a little rectangle there, and that gives me center. So even if the bowl, you know the way sometimes if look at that, never saw that. When you make a bowl, if the bowl is made out of a huge log and you've got your grain going this way, you know your grain line is going off, that'll warp evenly. If the bowl is made this way and it comes out of a section of the log like that, it'll warp evenly, okay? Where you get a problem is if you cut a bowl so that the grain is going this way. In other words, there's a log, there's the center, and you've taken a bowl, there's your grain lines. Oh, they're not doing a very good job of this. But you cut a bowl out of it like that so that the grain lines are all crooked. What's going to happen when it dries is that the center, the base, is going to drift off center so that this becomes longer than this. You understand? So that's when you have to use your square and pencil to find where center is. Because when you're centering a faceplate, you don't center it on the old rim. You center it on, you don't center it on the old base. You center it on the rim of the bowl so that you get the maximum diameter out of your rough out. Does that make sense? Good. This is interesting. Nope. You mean I got to get more torque? Like that? Yeah, you only need 4 screws in that. We don't want to be overworking ourselves. Now you see the wobble? See, it's wobbling. Okay. Now the tools we need to do this, we need our side ground gouge for doing the outside, and the regular bowl gouge for doing here and here, and then for doing the inside under the rim, these are 2 specially ground tools, and one is that guy with the the pointed guy with the little square end on it that I was talking about earlier, and the other is side ground way up the side. Okay. Sorry, I thought someone said something. Anyway, and then down in the bottom again we'll use our old friend for just doing that last little bit. So the first thing we do is it's always a good idea to measure the depth that you've got. Sometimes you literally have to fill the screw holes with glue and dust because you've gone too deep on the inside. There's no shame in that at all. Now it's great if you can Obviously with a regular gouge turned well over on its side, you can cut from the rim all the way down to the base and get a decent cut. But if you can use the side ground, there's something moving here. Okay. First of all, just here on the shoulder, take off a bit. Now it's over on its side, and right about here, I've been cutting with the nose bevel, and right about here I roll it back on its back and I start cutting with the side. Can you see that? So that the wood is coming down at more of an angle. Now you can see that the gouge is almost up on its back. That's so that the wood comes down at an angle on where it starts to rise up the side. Okay, now I just did that so that I could get this in closer. Now I need to true up from the base. And in order to keep the bevel riding, I lift the gouge up like that. I drop the handle way down and I bring it up at an angle like that. And it cuts really, really sharply. Remember that cut I was showing you earlier? And this is where it comes into its own. Now I can feel that there's still a little bit of the old surface in there, so I'll do it again. Drop the handle, go back if you need to, drop the handle and just come up with the... This is the thing about sharpening high-speed steel. In the old days you were literally using in the old days of tool steel, when you sharpened an edge, you were using that sharp point here. Whereas with high-speed steel, it raises a tiny little burr like that on the edge. You know what I'm saying? If you feel that, you can feel a little burr. And that, in the old days, we would have taken that off with the slipstone because it was inefficient. But nowadays this is a very useful part of the tool. Do you remember the old furniture scrapers? How many people have ever used the furniture scraper? Same technique, same principle. Now that's nice and smooth. I'm just going to kiss it with a couple of rubbing cuts just to take off some very tiny little ridges like that. Now this is slightly spalted beech. Now that's good. That's all very good. The next thing I want to do is I want to finish the fine cutting of the wall, the outside wall up here. Now you can either get your regular gouge and turn it well over on its side like that. Continue your cut up like that. You notice how far over that gouge is laying, and don't press the bevel too hard on the wood. You can hear a bit of a noise there. That's from the wood is moving, because even though I'm using very light pressure, there's still just a little bit of rub going on there. So that's one way of finishing your cut. I'm just checking it for pesky little rub marks or anything like that. Now again, if you want to give it a little rub of the the side ground, shear scraping. Back home I would just go by feel, but just to let you see. Now the next job is to straighten off that rim. Now you see that when you rub the bevel there's a bit of a wobble because of the old surface. So rub the bevel gently and come out like that. Take a couple of swipes at it. Hey, there's still a little bit of the old surface there. Again, rub the bevel. Back out and go in cutting. Now, so you're getting nice shavings there. Actually, that's not even. There's a ridge just there. That's good. Now, just a little design point. Here on the rim, this is not mechanically flat. You know what I'm saying? This rim here. It's got a very slight, I'll exaggerate it for effect here, but it's got a very slight curve downwards coming in here. If it was mechanically flat, it wouldn't. It would just feel wrong. You know what I'm saying? So it's much better when you rub that. There's just a tiny little bit of a curve in it. It just feels better. That's all part of the design thinking. Now, this is the tricky part, is doing the undercut here. So the first thing we do is we trim this, the inside of the rim here. Make sure your bevel is riding and that the gouge is well over on its side. If it feels good, it's probably okay, although sometimes you can have little furry areas where you have the end grain, and it's the case here. There's a little bit of furry area just there. It doesn't show up on the thing, but anyway. Now that should be okay. Now, this is where I get to explain why there's a little square end on this, okay? It'll soon be coffee time. When you see me doing this, that's coffee time nearly. Okay, so the end of the tool is shaped like that. And the reason is that if you're cutting in under the rim of a bowl and you're taking away stuff, if you want to remove the waste here, well, when you push it in, if it's just a point, it'll go in and then it'll get stuck. Whereas with the square end, it'll keep cutting, keep cutting bits off. You understand me? As well as that, when you come to the part where you're going around the inside, your square end is slewed sideways so that you take out some of the inside down here. Okay? Now this is reasonably sharp. This is where I get to do the old Ellsworth trick, you know. Am I in the light of the camera or something there? Okay. So you push it away from you like that. And you keep doing that. And then you go sideways. Now it's very important that you don't leave yourself with a very square undercut here. That, in other words, don't go too far into the corner of the tool. Oh, we're doing that again. So I kind of slew it sideways. That's a great word, slew, isn't it? Kind of, what would you say? Scoot it sideways? Huh? Kind of. Now, what you've got in here at the moment under the rim, there's your rim. You've got something like this, and then it's got, you know, like that. See the way I left it kind of very rough, but I didn't go too far in here. Because if you get a square under there, when you feel it with your fingers, it just feels wrong. It's nice when it's nice and round. Now, this is the other tool. It's got a nice round nose and it's ground way back the side. You see that? Now, can you see that step? Okay. Do you know what that step does? Nothing. What happened was, after a while grinding it at the side, I ended up that it was kind of going outwards and it was too bulky and I wasn't getting the straightness that I needed, so I just drilled it, you know, just ground it in. Alright, so don't be fooled by the shape. And when that one gets down to about so thin, oh, there we are. When it gets down to where it's useless, you just get get one of those high-speed steel grinders that you can buy and just cut it off and re-grind it here, or buy a new one, whichever. Now, you use light brushing strokes. Now it's getting kind of jammed up with shavings, so back home I have the air gun, you know, and just, plus I have, now I find out I could have moved the headstock along. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But the air gun is very good because you can just, you just blow it out. Now in a demo situation I never do that because the demonstrator and the front row all get, so we won't do that. Just taking a look inside, make sure that I've got all the, yeah, I'll take that. So the side edge here cleans the underside and the nose. Now here's a very important point. When you're grinding a round scraper, and I'll be going back to this subject when we're doing our container later, but if you're working inside a bowl, if you're trying to get, wait a minute now, start again, Liam. When you grind a round scraper, it's very important that this curve is perfectly round. Because if you grind it in such a way that you end up with any little irregularity in the curve, used inside a bowl, the irregularity in the curve will replicate itself. In other words, it's extremely difficult to get a clean curve inside a turn piece with a tool that's not ground perfectly round. Now it's, what do they call it, parabolic? Back in Ireland that's bad language, but anyway. So for in here, it's important that this is nicely rounded, so that when you're grinding it, you go very slowly and you go very evenly on your smoothest stone, all right? Now, the next bit is how do you cut the rest of the inside of the bowl shape using the side ground? Well, you have to kind of rest the short angle nose in the cut that you've already made with the round scraper and continue that down. Now, occasionally I have been known to go out through the side, all right? So I bet you're all hoping I do, right? So you get the bevel riding. Now I find that it's better to do the side wall down as far as maybe about there, about halfway or so, and concentrate on getting the first part of the line done. In other words, we've already done this area here. So you get your bevel riding here and go down as far as about here and just get that section done. Get this, in other words, get this curve married into this side. Do you understand? And just stop there. And the reason is that this is very close to where you're cutting, so it's going to be there's going to be less chance of problems. So I'm just making darn sure. Now, by the way, I'm just going to do a little bit of self-advertisement here. I'm coming back next year. My son now lives here in Kansas City, so I'm going to be back once a year. And if there are some of you who are interested in doing a workshop, hands-on, doing this bowl, this is one of the most popular hands-on demos that I do. I'll be doing it next week down in North Carolina, in Asheville. And then the following week I'll be doing it in Alabama. See, I'm Alabama bound. So anyway, it's a wonderful way of learning tool control. The two projects that I do most often for hands-on is the crooked grain container and this bowl, because they really stretch your tool technology. You know, solving this problem and getting down around that curve with the bevel rubbing, they're kind of stuff that's useful in many other applications later on. So now for doing the bottom, sometimes you have to go back to your grinding wheel and shorten this. Do you know what I mean? In other words, make it even squarer. I know that everybody nowadays uses the sort of like a grizzly jig or whatever, and I absolutely think they're the best thing since fried bread, because when you start out turning first, you've got enough problems learning how to turn without having to learn how to grind as well, correct? So in the old days, before jigs, you just had to learn how to grind properly as well as turn properly. And they are two completely different skills, and they're each as tricky as the other. So when the grizzly jigs came along, they made life easier for the students and for the teachers. But what I'm saying to you is this: your grizzly jig or your sharpening jig, it's like the training wheels on a kid's bike, right? You use them until you can grind, and then try and learn to grind freehand, because you can change angles in the middle of a project using the same gouge. Oh, you can't do that. It said in the book it had to be 40 degrees. Yeah, you can change angles on any tool at any time. Don't let people kid you that there's a right angle for everything. Maybe for different reasons, but anyway. Okay, now. Now what I find is that as I go around the corner down here, this is no longer rubbing. And what's happening is, I need to do what I said. I need to square that, because what's happening at the moment is the back of the tool is hitting the rim, and I'm ending up skipping the point of the cutting edge across, and that's not going to produce a good edge. So we'll go to the grinder. Now another thing about grinders is that apart from the jig, people think they need a rest. Well, a rest is handy as well, but when we started off in the apprenticeship days, the old barefoot in the snow again, we didn't actually use a rest. Hello, we need motion lotion here. Give me a second, talk among yourselves. There was a school teacher at home in Ireland, and he taught in a little country school. And Sean heard this the other night, so shut up you, okay? He heard this, the school teacher anyway, little country school, farm guys, mountainy men, you know, invincibly ignorant. You know the sort? There was a fella called Mick, and he went through the whole school time, and the teacher found it very hard to get any information into his noggin. But eventually the guy left school, and the teacher sort of waved him goodbye and thought, gosh, I don't know how he's ever going to make anything out of himself, you know. So anyway, a couple of years later, the teacher's walking through a local town, and who does he run into but Mick? How are you, Mick? Great, sir. How's yourself? Great. Oh, Mick, how are you getting on since you left school? Well, sir, I have a job. And what's the job? I'm an undertaker's assistant. Really? Yep. And what does that entail? Well, sir, whenever somebody dies, he said, before the undertaker comes to prepare him for putting in the coffin, I go along and I cleans up the scene and gets the body ready. He says, in fact, I'm going to do it right now. Would you like to come along and see what I do? So the teacher says, nothing ventured, nothing gained, you know, I might as well. So off they go, down one street, over another street, up an alley, come to a door. The young fella says, yeah, this looks like the right door, yeah, this is it, yeah. So they go in the door, they go up a stairs, room on the right, corpse in the bed. Now, you know the thing with corpses, when they die, is that sometimes they're lying in the bed with their knees up like that. Do you follow me? Okay. So they go in anyway, and there's the corpse in the bed with the knees up. And the teacher says to the young fella, now, he says, you seem to have a problem here, Mick. Ah, that's no problem at all, sir. We have an answer for that one. So he goes over to the corner, picks up a wooden chair, walks over, and comes down, wham, on the knees of the corpse, with which the corpse sits up in bed yelling like crazy. And your man says, "Oh, sir, get out quick, we're in the wrong house." Yeah. Right. Back to the business. Now, I'm going to shorten the angle. And now it's much squarer, so it'll probably rub the bevel all the way around. Oh, I remember now, I swapped them. Yeah. It's fun though, isn't it? It means that you never get bored. Here we go. Now, by the way, you go slowly. You're not trying to prove how fast you are. You're just trying to prove that you can do it. This is a great way of learning tool control, because you can go all the way to the center with the bevel riding. Now, I'm stopping for a minute because I just want to keep checking. To see those nice shavings coming out there? I don't like the sound of that. No, it's okay. Now we're getting there. By the way, I take issue with a lot of demonstrators for going too fast. It's something I don't like, because it impresses the hell out of everyone watching, but they learn nothing. Do you get me? So slow is the best way. There we go. Now, remember what I said about the dimple in the middle? Well, this is a situation where you're almost certainly bound 100% of the time to get a dimple in the middle. So I'm just going to give it a slight rub with the scraper. Make sure your scraper is kind of at a downward angle. And just a gentle touch. Okay, do we have coffee? Okay. So while you're passing this around, we'll take a coffee break. It's 20 to 11 now, so you can be passing this around, and then we'll talk about finishing when we come back. How's that?